Hi everybody. I just saw this and it looked interesting. It's called How Jews Financiated Conquest of Sicily in 1860. I don't know, man. Let's see it. Maybe it's interesting. Maybe it's bullshit. I don't know. Let's get into it.
In the spring of 1860, 1,000 men in red shirts boarded two stolen steamships in Genoa harbor and sailed south to invade a kingdom of 9 million people. They had old flintlock muskets, no artillery, no cavalry, and almost no money of their own. By autumn, they had toppled the oldest dynasty in Italy and handed half a peninsula to a king they didn't even particularly like. The story you've probably heard is about Giuseppe Garibaldi, the bearded general in the poncho charging up hills and inspiring a continent. That story is true. It's also incomplete, because before Garibaldi could sail, somebody had to buy the ships, somebody had to buy the rifles, somebody had to feed and clothe over 20,000 reinforcements who poured into Sicily and Naples in the months that followed. The Piedmontese government refused to pay for it openly. Half the volunteers were broke students and craftsmen. So where did the money come from? A surprising amount of it came from a small scattered community that made up less than 1% of the Italian population. The Jews of Italy, just over 30,000 people in a peninsula of 25 million, threw themselves into the conquest of southern Italy with money, with manpower, and with logistical networks that stretched from London to Livorno. The treasurer, who kept the books for the so-called
Why? Why? Why are they doing this? Why are they attacking Sicily and the oldest, is it Italian kingdom? I don't know.
Million Rifles Fund, was Jewish. The financier in London, who kept Giuseppe Mazzini alive in exile, was a Jewish widow. The chief of staff in Sicily,
Who the fuck is Giuseppe? Blah, 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 blah.
the man Garibaldi nicknamed the captain of the ship, was a
Who the fuck is Garibaldi, bro? Why don't he show the people he's talking about? That's annoying, just showing random pictures, bro.
Jewish veteran from Mantua, and the bankers who quietly
Ventura. Where the fuck is that? A veteran.
underwrote one of the most audacious revolutions of the 19th century were drawn again and again from Jewish families in Turin, Trieste, Livorno, and Pesaro. This isn't a hidden conspiracy. It's just a piece of history that mostly got tidied out of the schoolbook version. And once you understand why these particular 30,000 people had so much to gain from breaking the old Italy, the whole story of 1860 starts looking very different. This is how a barred minority, locked behind ghetto gates for centuries, bet everything on a revolutionary in a red shirt. And it's how that bet paid off in ways nobody on either side fully.
Wait, is this before Italy started doing G-side? Because all the G-side in the start of, what is it, 1900? Bro, this is actually interesting. Okay, so there was a monarchy who got attacked in Italy, the Italian monarchy. This is interesting, bro. This is actually interesting. Because in the 19 later in the 19th century, in the start of the 19th century, bro, Italy is horrible, bro. They're doing horrible things. Like in is it Libya, all of that, and bro, don't get me started, bro. But yeah, this this is fucking interesting, actually.
Predicted. To make sense of any of this, you have to understand what Italy looked like in 1860.
Because this gives a little pre-context to the start of the 1900s and Italy's politics, the construction of Italy's politics after.
Because the country we now call Italy didn't exist yet. The peninsula was carved up into about 8 pieces. There was the Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia in the northwest, run by the House of Savoy out of Turin. There was Austrian-controlled Lombardy Venetia in the north. There were a handful of small duchies, like Tuscany, Modena, and Parma, that mostly took orders from Vienna. There were the Papal States, a thick band of territory across the middle of the peninsula, directly ruled by the Pope. And down south, there was the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, ruled from Naples by a junior branch of the Spanish Bourbons. That kingdom alone, the territory Garibaldi was about to attack, had 9 million people. It was bigger than every other Italian state combined. Now drop the Jewish population onto this map. About 30,000 Jews lived in Italy in 1860, give or take. They were concentrated in certain cities. Livorno in Tuscany had a famous Jewish community that had been protected by the Medici for centuries. Trieste, technically part of the Austrian Empire, had a thriving merchant Jewish population. Venice still had a substantial community in the original ghetto, the very district that gave the world that word. Mantua, Modena, Pesaro, Ancona, Turin, Florence, Bologna, and above all Rome, had ancient Jewish quarters going back, in some cases.
So pretty much, the Jews were in all the places in Italy and lived as citizens and had their own areas, as far as I know.
2,000 years, and life in 1860 was very different depending on which of these states you happened to live in. In Piedmont, Sardinia, things had recently gotten dramatically better.
That's actually scary. That's scary actually. That people you see as neighbors and your own kin. What would you say in American? Your neighbors, your somebody you don't suspect, somebody you grew up with. He somehow have an ally, is allied with others because of his faith. That's actually scary, bro. That's actually pretty scary. The way he's saying it with the networks and all of that, and London is through London, and that's actually scary, bro.
In March of 1848, King Carlo Alberto,
Because then you can't even trust your neighbor, if you know what I mean.
had signed the Statuto Albertino. That document granted full civil and political equality to Jews and to Italian Protestants on the same day, in the same stroke. For the first time in Italian history, a Jewish citizen of Turin had exactly the same legal rights as a Catholic citizen of Turin. He could own land outside the old ghetto. He could enter the army as an officer. He could attend university. He could hold public office. Within a single generation, Jews who had been confined to a few narrow streets were running businesses, sitting in parliament, and serving as ministers of state. In the Papal States in the middle of the peninsula, none of that was true. The Roman ghetto, established by Pope Paul IV in 1555 with a papal bull whose opening words were, "Since it is absurd," was still standing. Jews in Rome lived behind locked gates that swung shut at sundown. They paid special taxes. They were forbidden from owning property outside the ghetto. They couldn't practice law or medicine on Christian patients. They were required until the 1840s to listen to weekly conversion sermons. And every year on certain religious feast days, Roman Jews had to send delegations to abase themselves before Christian authorities in rituals designed to humiliate them. And in 1858, 2 years before Garibaldi sailed, the Papal States produced an international scandal that hardened Jewish opinion across Italy and across Europe. In June of that year, Papal police walked into the home of a Jewish family in Bologna, the Mortaras. They took their 6-year-old son, Edgardo, away from his parents. The reason? A Catholic servant girl in the house had, years earlier, secretly poured water over the baby's head when he was sick in what she considered an emergency baptism. Under papal law, that made him a Catholic, and Catholic children could not be raised in Jewish households. Pope Pius IX personally protected the boy and refused, despite international protest, to return him. He never went home. He grew up to become a Catholic priest who took Pius as his religious name. The Mortara case detonated across Europe. Newspapers from London to New York covered it. Jewish communities, including the British Board of Deputies under Sir Moses Montefiore, lobbied governments to intervene. And inside Italy, every Jewish family that read about it understood the same thing. As long as the Pope had a kingdom, no Jewish child in central Italy was safe. That's the world in which Italian Jews started writing checks to Giuseppe Garibaldi. The man who would conquer Sicily was, in many ways, a perfect partner for a community
Okay, so this is actually becoming a religious war. Now we are entering a religious war. So, what this guy is telling me is he telling me that these guys organized and destroyed the Vatican and the Pope power? Let's see.
That wanted the old order torn down. Giuseppe Garibaldi was 52 years old in 1860. He'd already lived 3 lifetimes. He'd been a sailor, a candle maker in New Jersey, a guerrilla commander in Brazil and Uruguay, a defender of the
What? How the fuck have you pinned so many places? Is this some guy that just give money and he goes out and do the dirty work? Because it sounds like that. It sounds like it's he bro. It sounds like he is like a private army kind of shit, mercenary.
doomed Roman
Wait,
Republic of
I gotta go
1849,
back. I gotta
commander in
go
Brazil
back.
lifetimes. Garibaldi was 52 years old in 1860. The order torn down. Giuseppe Garibaldi was 52 years
Giuseppe Garibaldi. He was 50
old in 1860.
something.
He'd already lived 3 lifetimes. He'd been a
3
sailor,
lifetime.
a candle
Sailor,
maker in New Jersey,
candle
a
maker.
guerrilla commander in Brazil and Uruguay,
Cool.
a defender of the doomed Roman Republic of 1849, and by the time he arrived back in northern Italy in 1859, the single most famous revolutionary alive. Queen Victoria, no friend of revolutions, called him honest, disinterested, and brave. Italian peasants called him their second Jesus Christ. He was also, importantly, intensely anti-clerical. Garibaldi loathed the papacy. He considered the temporal power of the Pope one of the great obstacles to a free Italy. He believed in racial equality, in women's rights, and in the abolition of capital punishment. He was a Mason. He thought of himself in his old
And he was a Mason. Aha. This is very interesting. This is actually a very interesting video. Very scary. Actually, it's a horror video. A little horror video. Horror video slash not horror, but a little horror.
years as a socialist. The British and the French admired him. The Bourbon King in Naples and Pope Pius IX in Rome regarded him as a one-man earthquake. For a Jewish merchant in Livorno or a Jewish banker in Turin, Garibaldi was something extraordinary. He was a national hero who, unlike almost every other figure in Italian public life, did not draw his authority from Catholicism.
And he probably got all that recognition through the newspapers or something. And it would probably be interesting in seeing who owned those newspapers who glorified him. Interesting topic. This is very interesting video. This gives so much backstory to things. Very interesting. Bro, whoever made this video, he shot himself in the foot.
He was a man who, if he won, would not just unify Italy, but would also pull down the Papal States, dissolve the last ghettos, and create a state in which religion was a private matter. So when, in the spring of 1860,
Yeah, but you're gonna create that state through another religion who is using its power and infiltration of other states to push that state around and their people and the real owners of that land. Interesting.
the call went out for volunteers and money to back an invasion of Sicily, a community of 30,000 people responded with an enthusiasm that was wildly out of proportion to their numbers. To understand how the money moved, you have to look at the man at the center of the logistics. His name was Agostino Bertani. Bertani was a doctor from Milan, a Republican, an old comrade of Garibaldi's from the wars of the late 1840s. In the early 1850s,
Honestly, the only thing I can think now, who was truly in power in Italy, who was the elite of Italy in the start of the 19th century, who went out and allowed G-side and made the hands of the Italian in historical context very bloody, and I'm speaking very bloody. Like, let's not forget what really happened in Libya. You can see the movie. What's it called? The Lion of the Desert. I think it's called, with the history of. I forgot what it's called. The Lion of the Desert. But this, because honestly, when you see what the Italians did in Libya and North Africa in the start of the 19th century, it doesn't make sense. How come the Italians are so bloodthirsty and don't care about life, you know? But it seems like the Italian elite got replaced by the end of the, we see, 19th century, 18th century, until and had a new elite in the 19th century. So this is actually interesting to see how Italy actually got created and the elite of the country got established after the old elite was removed. This is fucking interesting, honestly. I like this video. I like this video very much.
He'd settled.
But I think this guy who made the video, he wanted to portray another kind of picture. This shit is fucking good.
In Genoa with a wave of refugees from the failed revolutions of 1848. By 1860, he was refugees from. In the early 1850s, he'd settled in Genoa with a wave of refugees from the failed revolutions of 1848. By 1860,
okay, who are those refugees from the other revolution? Why is he not telling that? Is this the same people who want to overthrow? Are they Catholics? What religion are they? Like, because it seems like, not to be like talking of religion, but it seems like this movement is provoked by religion. Some people not feeling like their religious freedom are met in these areas. So it seems like it's fueled by religion. So it actually would be very interesting to hear who those volunteers or who the refugees, what religion they were.
He was running an organization called the Casa Centrale di Provvedimento a Garibaldi, the Central Provision Fund for Garibaldi, which became the logistical brain of the entire campaign.
And who's funding that? Who's funding it? Whose produce are there? Where they're buying them? What prices are they getting them from? Actually, this is opening doors. Honestly, you historians on YouTube, do a deep dive, man.
Bertani didn't have a state behind him. The Piedmontese government, run by Prime Minister Camillo Cavour, was officially opposed to the expedition. Cavour was a master of realpolitik. He worried that Garibaldi was a loose cannon. He feared that an invasion of the two Sicilies would provoke France, anger Austria, and possibly trigger a wider war. So while Cavour secretly tolerated the preparations, he also refused to fund them. He kept his hands clean. Bertani had to raise the money himself, and he raised it through a network of fundraising committees that stretched across northern and central Italy, into Switzerland, into France, and most importantly, into Britain.
How? How did he do it? What made it possible for him to organize that? That's what I want to know. How? What organizations? Where? Where were the meetings? That is actually very interesting. Very
were
interesting.
the largest
I hope somebody do a deep dive of this, because this shit is deep, bro. Trust me, this shit. There's a bigger picture behind everything.
single donations came from organized sympathy committees in London, Glasgow, and Liverpool. He bought ships. He bought rifles, mostly old Austrian pattern muskets, converted to percussion locks in Belgium. He chartered medical supplies.
Who did that? Who did that in Belgium? Who sold him those weapons? How did he even get those weapons? How is he even able to get those weapons, actually, in Austria, and get them remade in Belgium? How is it even possible? How is it even possible to send that around like that through borders? How? Listen, I'm not saying anything, but infiltration might be happening. I'm not saying anything, but I honestly, okay, fuck that. I'm saying shit. Listen, bro, this shit is fucking scary. Are you saying to me these guys fucking infiltrated the whole fucking Europe and just played around however they wanted? Because this how it looked. Look, bro, listen, how the fuck do you buy weapons in Austria? Fucking send them to Belgium. Fucking get them modified. Fuck, bro, you don't just do that. You can't just do that. This guy is telling it like, yeah, bro, they just what with what FedEx, bro, bro. Shit was controlled back then. Everything was written down, bro. What the fuck, bro?
He paid for uniforms, for food, for the dozens of small expenses that turn a crowd of enthusiastic young men into something resembling an army. And he didn't do it alone. There were 3 other major fundraising entities in play, and the most important of them, the Fondo per il Milione di Fucili, the Million Rifles Fund, was run by a Jewish man. His name was Giuseppe Finzi.
Giuseppe Finzi. Funny name though. Sounds very Italian.
Finzi had been born in 1850.
$1 million rifles. Remember one thing. For every rifle, that means that rifle is built to kill somebody. That million rifles are not just to be looked at. Remember that.
In Rivajolo, Mantovano, a small town in the Mantua region. His parents were Abraham and Rosa Finzi, an observant Jewish family. The Finzis were one of the oldest and most distinguished Jewish names in Italy. The line went back to the 14th century, with branches in Padua, Ferrara, Mantua, and elsewhere. They had produced rabbis, physicians, mathematicians, and printers for centuries. Giuseppe Finzi joined.
Remember that. Printers. 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 When you print things, you print newspapers. You can glorify people. You can demonetize people. You can make up history. You can rewrite history. Printers.
In Giuseppe Mazzini's revolutionary network, Young Italy, as a teenager. In 1848, when the First War of Italian Independence broke out, he enlisted in the Piedmontese army. After the defeat at Novara, he followed Garibaldi south to defend the Roman Republic. When that fell, he became involved in a Mazzinian conspiracy in Mantua in 1852. The Austrians arrested him in the middle of the night at his family villa. They put him on trial. He refused, throughout the entire process, to name a single one of his comrades. The court sentenced him to 18 years of hard labor. He served 4 of them in Habsburg prisons in Prague, including time in the notorious fortress at Theresienstadt, before being released in an amnesty in 1856. By 1860, Finzi was a sitting member of parliament for the constituency of Viadana. He was also one of the 2 treasurers, alongside the non-Jewish Enrico Besana, of the Million Rifles Fund. That fund had been launched by Garibaldi himself in 1859 with the goal of arming a popular Italian army outside the control of any government. It collected donations from thousands of
1859. That means He started it in 1859. That means he was already planning it before. That means talks about it were probably already going on in 1855. Probably before. Interesting.
Subscribers across northern Italy. By the spring of 1860, it controlled the largest single pool of revolutionary cash in the peninsula. This is the part the standard story leaves out. The treasurer of Garibaldi's signature fundraising operation, the man literally signing checks to outfit the expedition of the 1,000, was an Italian Jew who had spent 4 years
Bruv, these guys are digging and digging and digging.
in an Austrian prison for trying to overthrow the existing order. But Finzi was just one.
And it's a guy who already tried to overthrow the Austrian regime. Let me just take it back.
In an Austrian prison for trying to overthrow the existing order. An Italian Jew who had spent 4 years in an Austrian prison for trying to overthrow the existing order.
God damn.
But Finzi was just one node in a much larger network.
Honestly, bro, listen. I don't got nothing against Jews. I like Jews. I got nothing, bro. Jews, they seem funny. Like, not funny like that. Like, they seem like they're having a great time, bro. Nothing bad, bro. They seem like normal people, bro. Just doing their thing. But, bro, when you hear shit like this, bro, that's not good, bro. That's not good, bro. It's not good. It's not giving a good picture. Honestly, it's not giving. I don't think it's a good picture, bro. All of them who are fucking involved are involved in fucking regime changes all over fucking everywhere. Pretty much what this guy is saying. Honestly, you fucking Europeans. Yeah. Surprising video, honestly. I like it.
To see how that network actually worked, you have to follow the money to London and to a Jewish widow named Sarah Levi Nathan. Sarah was born in Pesaro in 1819 into a wealthy Italian Jewish merchant family.
Listen, in the start of the video, they were crying, oh, no rights, oh, ghetto, oh, this. But it sounds like everybody is fucking rich. Everybody got money. It's pretty much what it sounds like. They can fucking go out and financiate wars. Bro, is it me or is the economics not the consistent? The economics doesn't make sense in this guy's jail's history. The economics don't make sense. How the fuck can you financiate $1 million fucking rifles, food, everything, blah blah blah, da da da, and you're acting like, oh, we don't got money. The fuck, bruv.
Her mother was a Rosselli from a line of patriots and traders. When her mother died, her father sent her not to a convent school, which would have been the cheapest and easiest option, but to relatives in Livorno, specifically to protect her from any pressure to convert to Catholicism. In Livorno, she met Meyer Moses Nathan, a German-born Jewish stockbroker who lived in London. They married, moved to England, and became British citizens by 1837. They had 12 children together. That same year, 1837, Sarah met Giuseppe Mazzini in his London exile. Mazzini was the original prophet of Italian unification. He was a Republican, a mystic, a relentless organizer, and the spiritual father of every revolutionary movement on the peninsula. He was also, at that point, one of the most wanted men in Europe. Austria wanted to hang him. The Pope had condemned him. The King of Piedmont,
Wait.
Republican, well, that same year.
Bro, I was just thinking about something else, so I didn't focus on the video.
Year 1837, Sarah met Giuseppe Mazzini in his London exile. Mazzini was the original prophet of Italian unification.
Mazzini, who was in exile, was not ruling of nothing in Italy.
He was a Republican, a mystic, a relentless organizer, and the spiritual father of every revolutionary movement on the peninsula.
Okay. So people should do a deep dive on this guy. How the fuck? Who the fuck gave him money in exile? He didn't make money on his name. Yeah, he did. Sorry, actually, he did. If if you count it like that, yeah, he did. But not like he thought he would.
He was also, at that point, one of the most wanted men in Europe. Austria wanted to hang him. The Pope had condemned him. The King of Piedmont would have been happy to see him executed. Sarah Levi Nathan adopted Mazzini's cause as her own. Her house
Why? Why? Who's he? And why did he get expelled?
in London became the central refuge for Italian political exiles in Britain. After the Roman Republic fell in 1849, when Mazzini fled back to England, the Nathan home became the operational headquarters of Italian republicanism.
Honestly, the only thing I can think, yeah, sure, they're gonna mask this as Democratic revolt and blah blah and what's it called? Giving freedom to people and all of this. And the next wars after this, the next 60 years, we have World War One, we have World War Two, we have wars all over the place, and now this guy we see London and this and that. Just imagine how much destruction these 200 years have seen. Honestly, we gotta be honest, with all these new weapons and bombs and all this shit, these last 200 years have destroyed culture, have destroyed uh, old fucking buildings pre these 200 years, like old buildings, 450, 500, 1,000 year old buildings were destroyed, bro. And it actually fucked up to think that these guys just financiated that and destroyed so much. How much destruction. Like, these guys are romanticizing this history. But we gotta understand it in the bigger context. There's so much destruction with this. It's unfathomable, bro. Honestly, it's honestly Europe. If if Europe haven't seen wars the last 200 years, honestly, Europe would pretty much be a fucking beautiful place, bro. Honestly, but as we can see, somebody behind the scenes are pulling strings and destroying. I'm not saying, listen, I'm not saying that people should not have freedom. Okay, sure, but still, if you're living a good life, if you can move anywhere else, move, bro. Honestly, you cannot just destroy a civilization just because you're butthurt, bro. Move. The fuck? As they said, all of them are migrants. Fine, bro. If you're a migrant, it's not your land. It's not your right to fucking destroy the way people there want to live. You have so many other places you can live, and you are even rich and making money in that place just because you're not getting all your rights. Nah, bro. Just nah, bro. It, and showed the history about the kid getting baptized and all. I don't know even if it's true. Who printed it? We are getting to that fucking conclusion. We cannot even trust who fucking printed it. You can even see the fucking people, the family members are fucking in that. They're fucking in all industries, bro. I'm not being fucking hate hating, but bro, you can see what this guy is saying, bro. Been they're giving money to start a war and do revolutions where people are dying, bro. Things can be done other ways, you know. People don't need to be dying and civilizations dying and building culture getting erased. That's weird. That's cruel. That's unhumane.
exile. She hired one of Mazzini's most trusted lieutenants, Maurizio Quadrio, as the tutor of her own children. She helped underwrite Mazzini's living expenses. She passed correspondence through her family network. In 1859, her husband Meyer Nathan died. He left her a fortune. And Sarah Levi Nathan used that fortune to do something almost no other private individual in Europe was doing in 1860. She funneled money directly to the revolutionary networks that were arming and supplying Garibaldi's volunteers. This is documented in her papers. Through her, according to Italian state archives, passed the financing that the Partito d'Azione, the Action Party, was using to buy weapons and promote insurrectionary activity in the lead-up to the expedition.
Honestly, I'm beginning to think about this like it's a war against the old elites, the old way of living, you know? I'm thinking about it like that now. It's not good.
She also returned to Italy that autumn, settling first in Florence, then in Milan, then later in Lugano.
Because let's be honest, after this, all these revolutions and all of this, the respect for human life, it's zero, bro. It's the end of the 1800s and the start of the 1900s, bro. All respect for human life have been lost in some places, and it seems like those places where they are lost are places who had revolutions in them. If we're gonna be frank, this is factual. This is not, I feel this, I feel that.
Partly to avoid arrest for her continued support of the revolutionary cause. She wasn't just writing checks from London. She was, in effect, running a private intelligence and financing operation across borders, and the network she belonged to was wider than her household. The Nathans were connected through marriage and business to the great Jewish banking houses of Europe, including links that reached the Rothschilds. They were tied by family to the Rosselli.
I gotta have these special effect sounds. I gotta make the special effect sounds. Honestly, I gotta. Bro, I don't even know what to say anymore. It's not even any conspiracy anymore. It's just, yeah.
Clan, another patriotic Italian Jewish family. They were tied by ideology to a circle of educated, secular, well-traveled Jewish merchants and professionals in half a dozen European cities. When money needed to move from Manchester to Genoa or from Paris to Livorno, that network was already in place. The Risorgimento didn't have to build it. The Risorgimento just had to plug in. So why did people like Sarah Levi Nathan and Giuseppe Finzi do this?
So what he's trying to say, kind of, as soon as they topple a established elite, they already have everything in place to take over the finances, the industries, the everything. They already have a blueprint to just reestablish a new society. That's so fucking scary, bro. That's honestly fucked up, bro. That's fucked up, bro.
What were they actually after? This is the part the older Italian patriotic histories tend to skip, or to wrap in a halo of pure idealism. The Jews fought for Italy because Italy was their home, the older histories say, and they wanted to be Italians. That's true as far as it goes.
Yeah, but only under the premise that they get everything how they want. If we're being honest. Pretty much.
But it isn't the whole truth. There were also very hard, very practical reasons why Italian Jews, more than almost any other group on the peninsula, had a direct material interest in the success of the expedition. Reason number one was emancipation itself. Piedmont had legally freed its Jews in 1848. The rest of the peninsula had not. As long as Italy remained fragmented, the rights enjoyed in Turin stopped at the border of Tuscany or the Papal States. Every step in the unification process, every Italian state absorbed into the Piedmontese system, automatically extended the 1848 statute to its Jewish population. Conquest from the Jewish perspective was emancipation. Garibaldi's volunteers, when they overran a town, didn't just plant the Italian tricolor. They effectively opened the ghetto gates. Reason number 2 was the destruction of the Papal States. As long as Pope Pius IX retained temporal power over central Italy, the Mortara case could happen again. Jewish children could be seized. Jewish business could be choked by laws specifically designed to keep them poor. Roman Jewry, the largest and oldest Jewish community in Italy, had no rights at all in 1860, and there was no legal path to change that within the existing system. The only way out was to dismantle the Pope's kingdom altogether, and the only force in Italy openly committed to that goal was Garibaldi.
I don't quite believe this part that they didn't have any rights and blah blah. Nah, bro, I don't believe that. That's just foolish. It's foolish. Show it, prove it. Okay, fine. They cannot be in the administration, and bro, you listen. It was a different culture and society. They had their own values. Who the fuck are you to tell them how their values should be? If you don't like it, you are a refugee. You live there, and you're not a refugee anymore. Listen. If you're there for fucking 600 years, almost 300 years, and you lived as a refugee, if you don't like the rule, move. You, this mentality of, oh, we gotta bring it all down and burn it all, nah, bro, that's fucked up, bro. If they fucking wanna be Catholic, let them be Catholic. What the fuck, bro? Honestly, I don't understand the Catholics. Why the fuck, bro? Why the fuck haven't you done anything, bro?
Reason number 3 was economic opportunity. The Risorgimento was a liberal, capitalist, modernizing project. It promised free trade, railroads, banks, a secular legal.
How is it free trade? Listen, okay, let's be honest. The average Italian family didn't have connection in that time in Austria, in Germany, in Scandinavia, in London, in America. Listen, how the fuck is it then equal terms? Honestly, this is. I see what is going on. I see what is going on. This revolutions were not revolutions for the ordinary people. It was revolutions for these guys who has organized and actually organized. I don't know if you criminal organization. I don't know if you could call it a criminal. You can because, and you can even use terrorist organization if you gotta be frank. You know, these organizations they made because people are getting killed. Like, and I'm starting to think about, does it have anything? How much does the Black Hand have to do with this? If anybody knows about the Black Hand.
System and the abolition of the old guild restrictions that had locked Jews out of dozens of professions. A unified Italy meant a single.
Yeah, that's normal. Honestly, I understand it. Bro, how you cannot trust? Listen, if I was a king and I had a community that didn't have any kind of loyalty, had communities in every kingdom that spied, bro, of course I would be fucking scared. Of course I wouldn't say to you, yeah, bro, you can't be the defense fucking minister. What the fuck, bro?
Market. It meant the chance to build commercial networks that could compete with the great European banking centers. Jewish bankers, merchants, traders, and ship owners stood to benefit enormously, and they knew it. Reason number 4 was social. For a class of educated, ambitious, secular Jewish young men, the Italian National Army and the Italian state bureaucracy represented the first real career path outside the Jewish community. The volunteer regiments of the Risorgimento became, in effect, a ticket out of the ghetto and into the Italian elite. Jewish historian and writer Sergio Della Pergola.
You heard that? You heard that? A ticket into the Italian elite. That is actually not true. What he is talking about is a total reconstruction of the Italian elite, the Italian culture. By default, if you replace the Italian elite, you replace the Italian culture and the way of the Italian way of living, culture, everything. This is very interesting, actually. Very, very interesting. And honestly, this video should be something every Italian sees. Because it's not Italians who wanted to change Italy, as far as we see in this video. In this video, it's shown that some other people, with the use of the people, as far as you see in this video, making revolutions and occupying, instead removing old elites, putting in their own elites themselves, is putting their own companies in, reimagining the society. Very interesting. I'm just saying, very interesting.
Has noted that for many such families, joining the Garibaldi expedition wasn't just patriotism. It was social mobility through gunpowder. And reason number 5, which the older
Social mobility through gunpowder. Interesting.
histories almost never mention, was simple disproportion. Italian Jews were a small, urban, literate, mobile, wealthy minority embedded in a peninsula that was mostly
A force that is easy to mobilize. What's it called? Mobilize. This is scary shit, bro.
rural, illiterate, and immobile. They could move money, information, and people faster than almost any comparable group.
So what he's saying, spies.
In a revolutionary operation that depended on speed, secrecy, and international coordination, that disproportion was an enormous strategic asset. The Jewish networks weren't just supporting the Risorgimento. In key logistical functions, they made it possible. None of this means Italian Jews were puppet masters running the show. They weren't.
What the fuck is this guy talking about? He just told us how the fucking whole thing was fucking put together, and he's saying, nah, they're not the puppet masters. What the fuck are you talking about? Who the fuck else is? The fucking aliens? Who? Fucking people from Mars? The fuck?
The Risorgimento was an overwhelmingly Catholic, overwhelmingly non-Jewish movement, led by Catholic generals, financed in much larger absolute terms by Catholic donors, and fought by Catholic soldiers. But within that movement, Jews punched far above their weight, and
Did he just try to wash his hands and like, oh yeah, there were some Catholics and yeah, they were pretty they were the majority though, and yeah, but the Jews gave all the money. Not the Jews, sorry, but that group that started it gave majority of the money and the power and the weapons to the generals, who probably had something to gain by doing that, like good paths, land, power. Probably, if you look into it, maybe what religion were they? Who knows? It's just fishy.
they did so because they had specific, identifiable interests in the outcome. By April of 1860, the pieces were
yeah, power. The generals, they know they would have power. The people who supported it, they pretty much didn't know shit what was going on. Yeah, I don't even
falling
want
into
to talk about this group who's provided the weapons, the money, the
place. A revolt had broken out in Palermo at the start of the month, an uprising centered on the Gancia monastery that was quickly crushed by Bourbon troops. The Sicilian exile Rosolino Pilo had slipped back onto the island to keep the embers glowing. In northern Italy, Garibaldi was hesitating. He didn't think the time was right. He didn't think the volunteers were ready. He worried that Cavour would betray him at the last moment. It was a Mazzinian agitator named Francesco Crispi, himself a Sicilian, who finally pushed Garibaldi over the line. Crispi had been working the Sicilian exile community in Turin. He convinced Garibaldi that the revolt was real, that the island was ready, and that the Bourbon army was demoralized and corrupt. Garibaldi agreed to lead the expedition. The Million Rifles Fund, run by Giuseppe Finzi and Enrico Besana, began releasing weapons. Bertani's Central Provision Fund started chartering ships and recruiting volunteers. The volunteers themselves came from across northern and central Italy. The largest contingent, 434 men, came from Austrian-occupied Lombardy.
What?
The volunteers themselves came from across northern and central Italy. The largest contingent, 434 men, came from Austrian-occupied Lombardy. Another, 194 came from Venetia. There were 156 from Genoa, 78 from Tuscany, 46 from Naples, 45 from Sicily itself, and 14 from the Trentino. They were students, doctors, lawyers, craftsmen, and small merchants. They were not, on the whole, peasants. They were the educated lower middle class of northern Italy. Two of those volunteers in particular deserve mention here. The first is Enrico Guastalla. The second is Enrico Uziel. Enrico Guastalla was a Jewish veteran from Mantua. He had fought in the Mantuan Riflemen's Corps in 1848. He had defended the Roman Republic in 1849, where Garibaldi himself had given him the nickname Captain of the Ship for his coolness under fire. He had fought at San Fermo and Varese in 1859 as a lieutenant in Garibaldi's Hunters of the Alps, and in 1860 he sailed with the 1,000. By the end of the campaign, he was Garibaldi's chief of staff in Sicily. He was wounded at the Battle of the Volturno. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel. Enrico Uziel was also Jewish, also a volunteer of the 1,000, also a veteran of the 1848 fighting. He was one of dozens of identifiable Jewish names on the rolls of the expedition. The Italian Jewish historian Anna Maria Isastia, who has worked extensively on this period, identified a substantial Jewish contingent within Garibaldi's various forces in 1860, including the 1,000 itself and the later reinforcements that swelled the army to 20,000 men. The proportion is what makes this remarkable. Jews were less than 1/4% of the Italian population. Their representation in the Garibaldian forces of 1860 was several times that. Per capita, the Jewish community supplied more volunteers to the conquest of southern Italy than almost any other identifiable subgroup in the peninsula. On the night of May 5, 1860, a small group of Garibaldi's officers, led by the firebrand Nino Bixio, walked down to the Genoa waterfront and seized 2 steamships from the Rubattino Shipping Company. The seizure was choreographed. The ships had been provided through a secret arrangement between the shipping company, the Piedmontese government, and Garibaldi's organizers. But the public theater of stealing them gave Cavour the political cover he needed to deny official involvement. The 2 steamers, the Piemonte and the Alma Lombardo, set sail that night from a rock at Quarto al Mare, just outside Genoa. On board were 1,089 men, a few thousand old muskets, some money raised by Finzi and Bertani, and a general who had no idea whether the Sicilians would actually rise up to meet him. They landed at Marsala, on the western tip of Sicily, on May 11th. 2 British Royal Navy ships were in the harbor when they arrived. The British were officially neutral. They were also in practice, looking the other way. The Bourbon coastal guns held their fire for fear of damaging the British vessels. By the time the Bourbon...
Oh, wow. Wow. So they sent the British ship first, infiltrated it first. Listen, we gotta understand. British ships, British elites, they got replaced also. I don't remember what time, if it was 17th century, 18th century, but those guys got replaced too. So those people who are sending the ships, I don't gotta say everything, bro. 1 + 1 gives 2.
Commanders sorted out what had happened. Garibaldi's men were already ashore. 4 days later, at Calatafimi, they fought their first battle. They were outnumbered roughly 2 to 1. The Bourbon troops held the high ground. Bixio suggested a retreat. Garibaldi reportedly replied, "Here we either make Italy or we die." Then a thrown rock hit him in the chest. He interpreted that to mean the enemy was out of ammunition, which it wasn't, and ordered an uphill charge anyway. The Bourbon line broke. The 1,000 had their first victory. Word of Calatafimi spread across Sicily within days. Volunteers, the so-called Picciotti, started joining Garibaldi by the hundreds. By the time he reached Palermo, the Sicilian capital, he had several thousand men. The Bourbon garrison in Palermo numbered 16,000. They were led by a general named Ferdinando Lanza, who, according to multiple historical accounts, had been bribed with British money to mismanage the defense. After 3 days of bombardment that killed about 600 civilians, Lanza asked for an armistice.
Civilians. Again, civilians.
The British Admiral Mundy negotiated it. By the end of June, Garibaldi controlled Palermo. And now, the reinforcements started flooding in. This is where the Jewish financing networks really earned their pay. From late May through the end of August, more than 20 separate expeditions sailed from Genoa, and later from Livorno, to bring fresh volunteers, supplies, and weapons to Sicily. Roughly 21,000 additional men made the crossing, on top of the original 1,000. Each expedition required ships. Each ship required charter fees, fuel, food, weapons, and crews. The bills were astronomical. The Piedmontese government officially paid nothing. Bertani's Central Fund, supported by Sarah Levy Nathan's network in London, by Giuseppe Finzi's Million Rifles Fund, by the Jewish banking houses of Trieste and Livorno, and by sympathetic Catholic donors across Italy and Britain, paid the bills. Sarah Levi Nathan's papers show her acting as a coordinator between London-based fundraising and the operational center in Genoa. Finzi's parliamentary correspondence shows him managing the disbursement of the Million Rifles money through that same summer. Other Jewish financiers, including the bankers Todros and Trevis de Bonfils, who had been backing Risorgimento causes since the 1840s, kept the supply lines moving. The British contribution was also crucial. A British legion of more than 600 volunteers, financed by the Garibaldi Special Fund Committee in London, sailed for southern Italy in the late summer. British donors in Glasgow and Liverpool offered days of their wages. The French newspaper Le Siècle launched a public subscription. American sympathizers raised money. The Garibaldi expedition became, in effect, the world's first major crowdfunded revolution, and the largest single international group within that fundraising effort, by proportion to its size, was the Italian and broader Jewish diaspora. There is also a darker thread to acknowledge here, because the audience deserves the full picture. Not all of this money was raised honestly, and not all of it was spent as advertised. The Million Rifles Fund itself was the subject of repeated disputes about transparency. Finzi and Besana, the two treasurers, were openly cautious about challenging Cavour's government and were accused, both during and after the campaign, of withholding funds from Bertani in order to maintain the political favor of the moderates in Turin. Some of the money raised in the name of buying rifles for Garibaldi was, in practice, diverted to other purposes. The Italian state archives still hold complaints written in 1860 and 1861 from veterans and from Bertani himself, claiming that promised weapons and money had never arrived. Sarah Levi Nathan herself, in private correspondence, complained about the mismanagement of revolutionary funds and about the political infighting between the Mazzinian and Cavourian factions. There were also accusations of personal enrichment. Several of the merchants who chartered ships to Garibaldi charged inflated prices. Some of the weapons procured for the volunteers were old, rusty, and overpriced. The Belgian arms dealers who refurbished the Austrian muskets in Liège made handsome profits. The merchant networks involved, Jewish and Catholic alike, were not running a charity. They were running a war on credit, and many of them expected and eventually received repayment from the new Italian state with substantial interest. None of this was unique to the Jewish participants. The whole Risorgimento was...
Wait, he just said in the video that most of the financing, the money came from Jewish donors, Jewish people. So what the fuck is he talking about now? Catholic. Again, he's trying to whitewash history. Nah, bruh. He was just proud through the whole fucking video of them fucking creating this and doing the revolution and fucking putting the whole fucking thing together, and now he's like trying to whitewash his hands. Nah, bro, don't fucking lie.
Financed in this messy, semi-legal, partially corrupt way. But the romantic version of the story, the one in which pure patriots gave money out of pure love of country, isn't quite accurate. The reality was that people gave money for a mix of motives. Idealism, yes, but also business sense, personal interest, factional politics, and in some cases, straightforward profit-seeking. By the end of July, Garibaldi controlled most of Sicily. Cavour, who had spent the spring trying to stop the expedition, now switched tactics. He realized the expedition was going to succeed whether he liked it or not, so he tried to seize control of it. He sent his agent, La Farina, to Palermo to displace Garibaldi's provisional government and absorb Sicily directly into the Piedmontese state before Garibaldi could cross to the mainland. It didn't work. Garibaldi, with Francesco Crispi as his political advisor and Enrico Guastalla as his chief of staff, kept control of the southern administration. On August 19th, he crossed the Strait of Messina with around 3,000 men. The Bourbon army in Calabria collapsed in front of him. He marched up the toe of Italy almost without firing a shot. By September 7th, he was riding into Naples, the largest city on the peninsula, in an open carriage with the Bourbon king Francis II, having fled to the fortress of Gaeta the day before. The Battle of the Volturno, fought on October 1st and 2nd outside Capua, was the last serious resistance. Garibaldi's 20,000 men, including Guastalla and the surviving Jewish volunteers of the 1,000, held off a Bourbon counterattack of about 25,000. Guastalla was wounded. The Bourbons retreated to Gaeta. By the end of October, Piedmontese regular troops, who had been driving south through the Papal States, met Garibaldi's redshirts at Teano. Garibaldi turned to King Victor Emmanuel and greeted him in front of the assembled army as King of Italy. A plebiscite was held on October 21st. The vote was nearly unanimous in favor of annexation to Piedmont. Whether the vote was clean is another question. There were credible accusations of intimidation, of stuffed ballot boxes, of administrative manipulation. In some Sicilian villages, men who didn't vote yes were beaten. In others, the voting registers seemed to have been simply rewritten after the fact. The plebiscite was, in practice, a referendum at gunpoint, and the small Italian Jewish press of the time noted, with a certain awkwardness, that the new Italy was being built on a popular mandate that wasn't entirely popular. But it was finally an Italy.
This video was more interesting than I thought in the start, honestly. But still, this video gave a lot of information to do a lot of deep dives, construction of trade networks, weapon factories. Who the fuck modified those weapons? Like, there's a lot about this that smells of collusion and yeah, bro. Who actually funded the revolutions in Europe and whose industries took over and what elites were put on power?
On March 17th, 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was formally proclaimed.
But honestly, I didn't know it ran this deep. Honestly. There's some people in Europe that have some deep their fingers are dug deep in shit, bruv, honestly. Because, damn, bro.
Victor Emmanuel II became its first king. The Southern Army, the Garibaldini, was largely disbanded and merged into the Piedmontese regular forces. Garibaldi himself, refusing all rewards, retired to his rocky island of Caprera with a sack of seeds and a box of pasta. And here is where the story for the Jewish community of Italy moves into its immediate aftermath. The first and most concrete effect was legal. The moment a territory was annexed to Piedmont, the 1848 statute extended to its Jewish population. The ghettos of Tuscany, Modena, Parma, and the parts of the Papal States absorbed in 1859 and 1860 effectively ceased to be ghettos. Jews in those territories suddenly enjoyed the full rights of Italian citizenship. They could own land. They could enter the professions.
Yeah, but the Italians lost all their power. Their industries were closed down and other people's industries that not even native to that country moved in, pretty much, and took the money out of the communities. And that is probably why you got so many empty cities in Italy now, because all those companies from abroad who moved in afterwards and the next 100 years just took money out of those communities. But
They
yeah,
could serve as officers in the army. They could hold political office. In a single year, the legal status of roughly 2/3 of Italian Jews was transformed. The exceptions were notable. Roman Jewry remained inside the ghetto because
2/3. 2/3, bro. The construction of the elite got changed.
Rome itself remained under papal control, propped up by a French garrison sent by Napoleon III.
Wow, okay, interesting. That's interesting, actually. So, was the Pope actually protected, or is the Pope actually held hostage? Wow, bro, this is deep, bro. Honestly, this shit is deep. Honestly. Fuck, bro.
Jews in Venice and the surrounding region remained under Austrian rule. For these two communities, the gates wouldn't open for several more years. Venice was incorporated into Italy in 1866 after the Austro-Prussian War. Rome held out until September of 1870, when Italian troops finally entered the city through a breach at Porta Pia. And in that 1870 assault, in a detail that captured the symbolism of the whole story, a Piedmontese Jewish officer gave the order to open fire on the Pope's defenders.
The reason it probably was 2/3 because the rest was women and they were like at home at that time.
The second effect was political. Jewish veterans and Jewish donors who had backed the expedition now stepped into prominent positions in the new state. Giuseppe Finzi, the treasurer of the Million Rifles Fund, served continuously in the Italian parliament from 1860 until his death in 1886. King Umberto I nominated him to the Senate just before he died. Enrico Guastalla, the wounded chief of staff in Sicily,
So listen, you can see it. He made an elite of the supporters.
was elected to parliament and eventually became a key figure in establishing the Museum of the Risorgimento in Milan. Isacco Arton.
That is actually scary. Actually, can you say this video is how the Italian people and culture and identity got occupied? Because let's be honest, after this, up if you go through what Italy becomes after this, bro, it's bad, bro. And after this, it's bad, bro. Italy becomes very bad country. In the start of the 19th centuries also, it's bad, bro. But you see, Italian people are struggling in that time, bro. They're fucking struggling. People are leaving abroad to go to America. So this is very interesting.
A Jewish diplomat who had served as Cavour's private secretary, continued his rise in the foreign service. Within a generation, the new Italy would have more Jewish parliamentarians in proportion to its Jewish
Bro, I gotta get these sound effects. I gotta get these sound effects. Damn, bro. I feel sad for the Italian people.
population than any other country in Europe. The Nathan family in particular came to embody what 1860 had made possible. Sarah Levi Nathan returned to Italy permanently. She moved to Milan, then to Lugano in Switzerland in 1862 to escape arrest for her continued financial support of the Action Party, then back to Italy after Mazzini's death. Her son Ernesto Nathan, born and raised in London, would become mayor of Rome in 1907, the first Jewish mayor of the ancient capital in a city where his coreligionists had been confined to a ghetto less than 4 decades earlier. The third effect was economic. The Jewish merchant and banking
Wow. So they're actually making humiliation rituals on the Catholic Church. Wow. Wow.
networks that had financed the expedition. now had access to a national market of 25 million people, where before they had served a half dozen
Got opening a national market of 25 million people. You know how much money is getting pulled out of Italy and people's local societies then? Damn. It's genius, honestly. Financially, for these guys, it's geniusly to do this. It's geniusly.
small markets divided by tariffs and borders. The construction of Italian railways, of new banks, of a national debt market drew heavily on Jewish capital and Jewish expertise. The banker
Wow. Honestly, the Jews, I swear, you are smart. You're smart. When people are so dumb, they deserve it. Honestly. Honestly. Damn, Italy. What happened? You're so proud. What happened? Damn, bro.
Todros and Trevis, who had bankrolled Risorgimento activities in the 1840s and 1850s, became significant figures in the financing of the new state. Family firms that had been confined to single cities in the
Just imagine how many Italians died after that because of those new reforms and other people getting rich now and the money going abroad. Just imagine how many Italians lost their lives because of that famine, not money in the local societies. Yeah,
1850s,
interesting.
built nationwide commercial empires in the 1860s and 1870s. The fourth effect was demographic.
Commercial empires. Let's just rewind that.
Family firms that had been confined to single cities in the 1850s built nationwide commercial empires in the 1860s and 1870s. The fourth effect was demographic and cultural. With legal restrictions gone, Italian Jews left the old ghettos in large numbers. They moved to Turin, Milan, Florence, Rome, and Naples. They built grand new
Pretty much the major cities.
synagogues, deliberately styled as cathedrals, designed to announce that they were now full participants in Italian public life. They Italianized their names, their dress, their speech.
They took new identities to, wow.
They served in the army. By the time of the First World War, 50 years on, about 5,000 Italian Jews would be conscripted into the Royal Italian Army, of whom roughly half would serve as officers, an astonishing figure for a community.
Half of them officers. What was the other half? Fucking generals and I don't know, man. What ranks are there after officers? God damn, officers. God.
Of fewer
damn.
than 50,000 people. About 420 Italian Jews would die in that war, and about 700 would receive military decorations. The pattern.
That's nothing, bro. There's not even a percent. That it is a percent. There's not even 10%. Bruh, these guys. Wow.
Set in 1860 held. The fifth effect was for the South itself, and this one was less happy. The conquest that had liberated northern and central Italian Jews from their ghettos also brought disaster to large parts of the Mezzogiorno. The Bourbon Kingdom, for all its faults, had operated a different economic system, with different tariffs, different legal codes, and different social arrangements. Its abrupt absorption into the Piedmontese state caused a collapse in southern industry, mass unemployment among Bourbon.
Sicilians, all you guys who are playing tough guys in America, in all of this, this is why your family was broke in Sicily. Listen, let's rewind.
Different legal codes and different social arrangements. System with different tariffs, different legal codes, and different social arrangements. Its abrupt absorption into the Piedmontese state caused a collapse in southern industry, mass unemployment among Bourbon soldiers and bureaucrats, and a brutal civil war that the new Italian state called brigandage. Roughly 140,000 Piedmontese troops were sent south to suppress it. Tens of thousands of Southerners were killed or displaced. Mass immigration to the Americas which would define Italian-American.
Wait. This is actually very interesting. This is actually very interesting because the American Italians. I gotta see if I can find this. Those guys probably try to organize, but those organizations got took over because I've heard histories of Italians and Jews mafia collaborating. But why are they collaborating? To suppress other Italians. And I never, understood why you would suppress your own, But to not be able to organize any kind of resistance, it would be smart to move in our organization to poison the community. Wow, bro, this is deep. Honestly, shit is deep, bro.
Demographics for the next century began in part as a refugee movement from this collapse. For the small Jewish community of Naples, this meant a paradox. They were now free in a way they hadn't been before. They were also surrounded, increasingly, by economic ruin. The benefits of unification accrued, in the short term, mostly to the north, including to the Jewish communities of the north. The South, including the Southerners who had cheered Garibaldi into Naples in September 1860, paid most of the bill. The immediate political aftermath for the broader Jewish financial network was a mix of gratitude, profit, and quiet disappointment. Sarah Levi Nathan, who had hoped that Mazzini's Republican vision would carry the day, never reconciled to the monarchical settlement. As late as August 1862, she wrote directly to Garibaldi, urging him to reunite with Mazzini and push the new state toward a republic. The letter, preserved in Italian archives, calls Garibaldi and Mazzini the two men whom Italy loves and esteems above all others. Garibaldi didn't take the bait. He attempted his own march on Rome that same month, was shot in the foot by Italian regular troops at Aspromonte, and was effectively neutralized as a political force. Mazzini himself remained in exile for most of the rest of his life, returning to Italy under a false name in 1871 and dying in Pisa in March of 1872 in the house of Sarah Levi Nathan's daughter, Janet Rosselli. Sarah was at his bedside. She took possession of his papers. She spent the next decade publishing his writings, funding his memorial school in Rome, and quietly building the foundations of what would become a Mazzinian civic legacy at the heart of liberal Italy. Giuseppe Vinci continued his parliamentary career until his death in 1886. He never wrote a comprehensive memoir of his role in financing the expedition. He didn't have to. His correspondence, his parliamentary votes, and the surviving records of the Million Rifles Fund tell the story. He had bet his career, his fortune, and 4 years of his life in an Austrian prison on the proposition that a unified Italy would be good for Italian Jews. The bet had paid off. Enrico Guastalla, the captain of the ship, lived until 1903. He died in Milan, in the city where he had helped establish the public memory of the Risorgimento itself. His name is still inscribed on monuments and on the streets near the Great Synagogue of Milan in Via Guastalla, named for his family. For Roman Jewry, the wait was longer. The Mortara family never saw their son Edgardo again. The boy continued his Catholic education, took religious orders, and died in 1940 in a monastery in Belgium, weeks before the German army arrived. The Roman ghetto continued to operate, with its gates still hung in their iron sockets, until September of 1870. When Italian troops finally broke into the city, one of the first acts of the new municipal authorities was to abolish the ghetto laws. Roman Jews stepped into Italian citizenship in 1870 as the very last of the peninsula's Jewish communities to do so. They had been waiting since 1555. The expedition of the 1,000 ended officially on November 9, 1860, when Garibaldi sailed for his island of Caprera. As his ship cleared Naples harbor, British warships fired a 21-gun salute. The Piedmontese fleet, which technically owed him a kingdom, remained silent. Garibaldi went home with the
Black hats. Interesting.
Contents of his pockets, and a few bags of dried fish. Cavour got the credit, the territory, and the political control. Mazzini got the writings and the moral high ground, but nothing else. The Italian Jews of 1860, taken as a community, got the closest thing to a clean strategic victory of any small group on the peninsula. Their money, their networks, and their volunteers had helped to bring down two regimes that had specifically discriminated against them, the Bourbons of Naples, and indirectly, the papacy itself, whose final collapse a decade later was the direct continuation of the same wave. The dowries Sarah Levy Nathan had spent, the 4 years Giuseppe Finzi had served in Theresienstadt, the wound Enrico Guastalla took at the Volturno, all of it traded for a single, transformative.
We are forgetting one thing. The means for them to be able to keep control is to delete any kind of elite or intellectual. When I say elite, I mean intellectual elite. They removed the intellectual elite, economic elite, all kinds of elites, you know? And that's probably why southern Italy don't have that much money anymore, still. Because every time somebody rose from the southern of Italy with intellectual knowledge, they probably removed them.
Fact that on March 17, 1861, the laws of the New Kingdom of Italy treated a Jewish citizen the same as a Catholic one, and that those laws, with the exception of Venice and Rome, applied to almost the entire peninsula. The expedition was 1,000 men in red shirts. Behind them was a logistical machine assembled from English donations, Belgian rifles, Genoese shipping, British naval looking the other way, and a remarkable concentration of capital and energy from a tiny minority that had been waiting.
I would not underplay it so much. Definitely, that is a totally underplacing. I would say this is a very powerful and good picture of the Jewish power in Europe at that time. Because we gotta understand this. The way they did this was through Jewish networks. Like I said, Rothschild, like I said, other names of the other people, Britain, we know the Jewish elites were well established in Britain at that time, in other countries. So, Belgium, very interesting. Very, very interesting video.
In some cases for 3 centuries, for a state to call its own. They got one. And in the immediate aftermath, in the autumn of 1860 and the spring of 1861, the gates of half the ghettos in Italy swung open and did not close again. If you found this history interesting, this next video will shock you. Click right here to watch it now.
Very interesting. I like this video. What was this? Why Jews finish? This I will see after. But very interesting. Have I subscribed? Yes. Very interesting. So when people say that these guys, bro, what can I'm even surprised, bro. I'm even surprised, bro. I didn't even know this video was gonna be so deep. Bro, these guys have the fucking fingers in everything. I don't know how, but it's fucking crazy, honestly. Just imagine how many people died. Just imagine how many consequences came from all that. That's what we are forgetting. All this have consequences. Like you said, people from southern Italy, they needed to flee. They didn't have money, food, economics, whatever, bro. All this are a direct response from them moving their industries that are not similar. They can move through border. Bruh, honestly, it's a takeover over the Italian society, the Italian culture, people, everything. Even abroad. This shit is deep, bro. This, if you go deeper, it's gonna be deep. This shit is deep, honestly, bro. I'm telling you, this shit is deep. This shit is deep. See you guys next time. Interesting video.